we're going to go to the feature match pit. Todd Anderson's at 6-1. Phillip Braverman's at 6-0-1. This is round 8, so there'll be one more round after this. So a win here will be very important for them to lock up a spot in the top 8.
Although we are at 360 or 70 or 80 some odd players, so there's no guarantee that X1-1 is good enough for the elimination rounds. Depending on tiebreakers, these players might be in a position to have to play out the next round, even if they win here.
So it looks like Phillip decided to mulligan to 5 in this round based on his hand. Gitaxian Pro from Todd reveals a hand that's not too interactive against a Sneak and Show player. So Todd plays a Volcanic Island and a Lotus Petal.
Yeah, the Swords to Plowshares is a marginal piece of utility in some cases, but Phillip is really looking for counter spells. He also has one main deck copy of Caracas that can provide a lot of disruption as well.
So we're going to see Todd play a Fletastrand and then followed up with a Brainstorm, looking for some combo pieces here. It doesn't look like he has a Fatty, an Emrakul, or a Grizzlebrand, or a Show and Tell or a Sneak Attack. So he doesn't have a Fatty or a way to put one into play.
And that's actually fairly common with a lot of Sneak and Show openings. They're missing some number of pieces, either a way to put something into play or something to put into play. In Todd's case, both. But the deck plays a plethora of cantrips to find the missing pieces. And you're seeing Todd here Brainstorm, shuffle his deck, and now probably follow up with a Ponder to try to find the missing pieces.
So, it looks like he's actually going to pass the turn, and Phillip Braverman is going to activate top on his upkeep with that island to smooth out his draw for his turn. So
the most likely scenario here is that Todd has a copy of Spell Pierce in his hand. He has 4 copies in his deck, and he's showing some amount of respect for the possibility of counterbalance out of Phillip's deck right here. Phillip is on 5 cards, but counterbalance plus Dividing Top is definitely a way for him to catch up.
Yes, a very problematic card. He doesn't have a lot of 4-drops in his deck to counter a Sneak Attack, but 3-drops should be reasonable enough to try to counter a Show and Tell. And Todd is going to play Ancient Tomb, take 2, and cast a Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 of the cards that he added to his main deck. Jace the Mind Sculptor, not usually a card you see in the main deck of Sneak and Show. We have seen in the sideboard, but Todd felt it was important, maybe given the number of Miracle decks in the format.
Yeah, like I said before, to me it's a very good stabilizing tool in the deck. Your draws are a little less extreme, a little less polarized, and a fast Jace is still plenty powerful. If this resolves, it's likely Todd can ride this all the way to a victory.
Yes, and you mentioned that Todd does have a Spell Pierce in his hand, so with that Lotus Petal up, he is representing the ability to cast Spell Pierce still. So Phillip Braverman digging for a counterspell with the Sensitive Divine Top. It doesn't look like he found one. He does have a Jace of his own in his hand, however, he is only on 2 mana, so it's going to be a while before he gets there.
And Todd would Spell Pierce, Force of Will, an additional blue card, so definitely has the tools to either push this Jace through or fight over Phillips down the line.
So Jace the Mind Sculptor resolves for Todd, and he uses the 0 ability using Brainstorm, netting himself 3 cards. It looks like one of them is an additional Spell Pierce.
It wouldn't be unreasonable for Todd to actually start trying to establish a Fate Seal lock this early in the game, but the presence of Sensei's Divining Top makes that a pretty challenging road to go down. So Todd's going to go down a more conventional road here and simply draw a bunch of cards, eventually power out something large.
And it looks like Phillip activated top, cast Brainstorm his turn, and he did find one of the few ways that can attack Jace the Mind Sculptor in his deck in Snapcaster Mage. He has 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage in his main deck. So Todd draws a Polluted Delta for the turn. He can now play one of the sack lands and sacrifice it. He knows what the other card on top of his library is from the Jace activation last turn, so does not want to see that card again.
Yeah, and Phillip really needs to do something to get this Jace off the table, because he's not going to be able to fight. Even if Phillip establishes counterbalance plus Dividing Top, Todd will likely be able to power through it with this Jace.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Todd still has that Sneak and Show element of his deck. So Phillip is getting attacked there from multiple angles. Not only does he have to find an answer to Jace, but Todd could eventually just find an Emrakul Grizzlebrand along with a way to put one into play, and then Phillip has to contend with that as well. So very difficult spot for Phillip.
And Todd has found a Sneak Attack, so step 1 potentially has resolved here, which is finding a way to cheat a large creature into play.
Yes, so Todd found the Sneak Attack. He's going to put 2 cards back on top of his library, and now it looks like he's just going to cast that Sneak Attack. He doesn't have a Fatty yet, but he just wants to try to get into play as soon as possible.
And he does have Ponder, other ways to shuffle his deck, so he's going to get to look at a lot of cards over the course of the next couple of turns with the combination of Jace and his various cantrips.
Yes, he also has multiple Force of Wills in his hand, along with multiple copies of Spell Pierce, so this is likely going to resolve Let's see what Phillip decides to do in response. He does have, I believe, 1 Spell Pierce in his hand, so he might try to counter. But again, Todd has access to 2 mana, so it won't really be that effective.
And this Jace is a really cool dimension for Todd's deck. It's particularly good against a deck like Miracles, where the game is going to be slow and they're going to try to fight you over your key spells. And Todd's deck with Ancient Tombs and City of Traders and Lotus Petals actually capable of a turn 1 Jace.
Yeah, it's pretty insane if considering, we haven't really seen in the main deck that often. It looks, I agree with you. It looks just so great, particularly because there's so many Miracle decks now in this metagame.
Yeah, and a lot of the matchups where Jace is not going to be at its best are matchups where your sneak attack show and tell element is quite good. So it's a logical hedge.
Again, you could always pitch it to Force of Will.
Yeah.
Worst comes to worst.
That old standby.
So Phillip is going to tap out, activating Sensei's Divine Egg Top. And it looks like Sneak Attack will resolve. And now Todd will follow that up with a Ponder, trying to find either a Grizzlebrand or an Emrakul. And he's going to shuffle those cards away. Again, he knew what those top cards were based on the Jace activation. He basically just wanted a free shuffle here. He's going to get another card.
Yeah, and at this stage, Todd's just looking for something to wrap this up. His domination over this game is complete. At this point, it's just an issue of finishing up the job.
Yes, which 4-mana card which 4-mana permanent of mine will kill you? Either Jace or Sneak Attack. One of them will do the job, though.
Yeah.
So Phillip plays a Scalding Target. He now has 4 mana, so he has access to Jace. However, pretty risky just playing and tapping out for a Jace, considering you're facing another Jace and a Sneak Attack.
And Todd's just looked at so many cards also.
Yeah, you have to expect him to eventually find something. So does not find one yet, but he is going to get to cast Gitaxian Probe after shuffling his library with the Misty Rainforest. So he's going to get another chance to find something.
So there's part of me that suspects that Todd is slightly annoyed that he hasn't found a way to wrap this game up yet. And there's part of me that suspects Todd is really enjoying the fact that he hasn't found a way to wrap this game up yet, and he gets to do this for a couple more turns.
Yeah, he's not. It's not like he feels the game slipping away from him. It is a little strange considering how many cards he's seen this game. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think he's in any fear of losing. He's just might get a little frustrated, but at the same time, he is doing a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, this is fun.
Getting to activate Jace a lot of times is pretty fun.
And he's on camera while he does it. His friends at home get to watch him do this.
Oh, hello. There's a Grizzlebrand. So Snake Attack will get activated, and a Grizzlebrand will enter play. And let's see if Todd's going to actually activate it to draw 7 cards, falling to 4, so he can find that Emrakul.
Phillip has a pretty brave face on through all this. I do appreciate his demeanor at the table, making a good faith effort to plug along in face of these odds.
So Terminus trigger, the Miracle trigger, after the Sensei's Divine Type activation, and Force of Will get cast, pitching a Ponder to counter that Terminus.
And again, Todd has full information on Phillip's hand through that Gitaxian Probe, so he knows this is a safe play. Phillip with just a Spell Pierce here as a way to interact.
So Force of Will on the stack. We're going to see Snapcaster Mage get cast in response. It looks like we're going to target possibly is that a Brainstorm or?
Yeah, I think that Phillip is just trying to brainstorm here for a Force of Will. Todd's got that on check with Spell Pierce, even if Phillip finds it. But again, Phillip just trying to go about his business.
Yeah, still got to make the right play. And it looks like Todd is just showing the Spell Pierce, so not even going to bother letting him draw cards here. So Force of Will does resolve, so the Terminus gets countered, and now Grizzlebrand is going to draw 7 cards for Todd, bringing him to 3. Does he find an Emrakul? Looks like he does not.
So unlucky.
He does not find an Emrakul, so it looks like he might have to. He still has options. He can actually cast Ponder, I believe. He might have a Ponder still, or no, he pitched it. So not sure if he has any more manipulation. He's just going to have to settle for attacking for 7 and drawing an additional 7 cards.
Not a bad consolation prize, all told.
Yeah, he did get another Grizzlebrand in his hand, though, so he will be able to effectively make the same play next turn.
Well, it's also possible that he could use Grizzlebrand as a defensive sneak attack next turn if Phillip decides to go after Todd's Jace with his Snapcaster Mage, block, draw some more cards, and try to find a way to finish out the game from there.
Yeah, by that point, he could effectively draw 14 cards if he chooses, so you have to imagine he's eventually going to find Emrakul.
Yeah.
So Todd's still in good shape despite the fact that he didn't find the Emrakul. He's got a fistful of cards. 2 of them are Force of Will and plenty of blue cards to pitch. So looks like we might get a show and tell here. And he's actually just going to put the Grizzlebrand into play off the show and tell.
And again, under normal circumstances, this play would be slightly risky, but Todd does know the contents of Phillip's hand and has a lot of counterspells of his own to work with, so not nearly the risk it would be in the abstract.
Yes, he also knows exactly what's on top of Phillip's great library because the Sensei's Divine Top was activated. And Jace will try to get cast here, and we're just going to see a Spell Snare from Todd. Phillip has his own Spell Snare, and he's just going to sacrifice 2 Lotus Petals to pay for the mana. So Jace gets countered, and Grizzlebrand is still in play.
And Phillip has finally hit his threshold of abuse and lets this one go.
So Todd Anderson, on the strength of Jace the Mind Sculptor, wins the first game. And we're going to go to our sideboards now. And Todd, he's got a lot of options. He's played Miracles. He's obviously built this deck with Miracles on mind with the Jace main deck. After board, he's got 1 Red Elemental Blast, 1 Boseiju, who shelters all, 2 Through the Breach, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Swan Song, 4 Leyline of Sanctity, and 3 Pyroclasm. Now, obviously, Leyline, Pyroclasm, not really useful for this matchup. Same goes for the Grafdigger's Cage. Swan Song's probably more of a card for the Mirror. It does give him the option to counterbalance, but again, probably not really for this matchup. I would say Red Elemental Blast, Through the Breach, and the Boseiju are probably the 4 cards you could potentially see in this matchup.
Yeah, I think Boseiju is actually a relatively underplayed card in Legacy. It's so powerful against certain strategies because their primary mode of interaction against you is counterspells. Boseiju is a very clean, efficient answer to those sort of threats. From Phillip's side, he's got a Mountain, a Pithy Needle, a Grafdigger's Cage, a Red Elemental Blast, 2 Pyroblasts, a Rest in Peace, a Disenchant, an Aethersworn Canonist, 2 copies of Stoneforge Mystic, a Meddling Mage, a Vendilion Click to go along with 2 in the main deck, a Venser Shaper Savant, and a Batterskull, again to go alongside with the Stoneforge Mystics that he has on the board. 0 copies in his main. I would expect the Disenchant to come in here. There are times where the Sneak and Show deck doesn't have redundant red mana, so it's forced to cast Sneak Attack, say go, and hope that it gets to untap with the red mana in play. So cards like Disenchant can be effective at times. The Red Elemental Blast and the 2 Pyroblasts are excellent here, of course. Todd with a no end of blue spells. The Pithy Needle can be effective against both Sneak Attack and Grizzlebrand potentially. The Meddling Mage and the Vendilion Click and the Venser are all reasonably powerful disruptive tools against combo decks in general. So Phillip has a lot of cards to bring in here, and he can safely get rid of some of his less efficient cards.
I also kind of like the Aethersworn Canonist in this matchup because Todd's plan is usually to use his counterspells proactively to force through his threats. So Aethersworn Canonist sort of shuts down that mode.
Yeah, and Phillip probably wants to just be a little bit more aggressive in the matchup anyway. It's hard to hold off Todd forever. Yeah. If you let him go unchecked, he can cantrip his way into a perfect hand and fight through all your counterspells. Now, Phillip does have counterbalance plus Sensei's Divining Top, so he has the potential to lock out all of Todd's cantrips, and then his random Force of Wills and Spell Pierces become much more effective defensive measures. It's much harder for Todd to build up a hand that can go off through all that stuff. But in general, I think Phillip will want to be a little more aggressive, be more proactive with threats like Meddling Mage, like Vendilion Click, Aethersworn Canonist that you just mentioned. Try to end the game quickly. If he is able to establish counterbalance, Divining Top, and that's effective, great. But he can't lean on that plan entirely because there's no guarantee it's effective, and Phillip is under a lot of pressure to find it quickly, assuming he's not disrupting Todd in some other fashion.
Yes, definitely. So both players have finished sideboarding, and they shuffled up, presented, and now we're going to resolve mulligans. Phillip Braverman lost the first game, so he's going to decide if he wants to play or draw. I imagine he's going to be on the play. So he's debating if he wants to keep his opening 7. He is okay, and so is Todd. So both players are going to be off. Phillip leads with a Tundra. And Todd, there's that Boseiju we were talking about.
I got bad news for you, Phillip. Todd came here with you in mind.
Although the good thing about that is Boseiju doesn't work with, it only works with spells, not with enchantments. So it's not going to get a sneak attack to resolve uncounterable. However, he could cast a show and tell or through the breach. Now, if it's a show and tell, Phillip does have answers because there are things that he could put into play off the show and tell. Unfortunately, Todd could also put a sneak attack into play off a show and tell. So very, very good card for Todd.
Yeah, and Todd's hand was actually missing both blue and red mana. It looks like he kept a hand of Beseju, Ancient Tomb, and spells, and has just drawn Volcanic Islands. So now his whole hand is operational.
Yeah, so yeah, it looks like we see a Jace the Mind Sculptor in his hand, a Through the Breach. It looks like he has Through the Breach, Show and Tell, and Sneak Attack in his hand. So a lot of options for Todd. Not sure if he has a Fatty. He might have an Emrakul in his hand as well. Yes, he does. Emrakul and Grizzlebrand. So pretty good hand for Todd. But it looks like this is on his upkeep after his draw, or after his draw step rather. And Phillip is going to cast a Vendilion Click.
And you see Through the Breach plus a red source of mana plus Beseju. This is big time trouble for Phillip.
Yeah, this is actually the perfect hand for Todd, because even though the click will be able to get something, Todd just has so many redundant copies of ways to not only get a fatty, not only fatties, but ways to get those fatties into play.
Yeah, he has Show and Tell plus Through the Breach plus Beseju. So there's a way to force a spell through no matter what. He has also Grizzlebrand plus Emrakul. So there's nothing that Phillip can actually cut him off from here.
Yeah, so Todd could actually try to resolve a Show and Tell this turn. However, that does give Phillip outs. Todd will be able to get a Sneak Attack in play, although he doesn't have another red mana to actually activate it this turn. So if Phillip does put, for instance, an Oblivion Ring into play, then Todd will just lose his Sneak Attack. So Todd still has to make the correct decision here. So there's a lot of cards that Phillip can put into play off a Show and Tell that can prove problematic for Todd.
Yeah, even Caracas could be pretty damaging here depending on how Todd plays it exactly. So.
And let's not forget that Phillip also has 4 copies of Terminus in his deck as well. So if you just put a fatty into play, there's no guarantee that it'll even resolve.
Yeah.
Stay in play, rather.
But this is a really tough hand for Phillip. Todd just has so many angles of attack here.
Yeah, and Phillip doesn't even have, it doesn't look like he has a lot of, he just has a bunch of counter spells, it looks like, in his hand. So that Beseju is going to prove really problematic for him.
All 7 of Todd's spells are disasters for Phillip. The most innocuous thing in the hand may actually be Jace the Mind Sculptor. And that's saying quite a bit.
And it looks like Todd drew another land here, so that is a good draw for him. Next turn, he could actually try to resolve the Show and Tell, and Sneak Attack can enter play and still activate in the same turn. So let's see what Todd decides to do. If he leaves with the Volcanic Island and doesn't do anything this turn, he exposes himself a little bit to Wasteland.
Very unlikely that Phillip's, once you've seen Counterbalance plus Divine Top, that Wasteland is in the deck, but certainly these are all small considerations Todd needs to concern himself with.
So Todd is going to cast Brainstorm here, and looks like Phillip, given that he knows exactly what's in Todd's hand, looks like Phillip might actually try to fight over this one, and yes, he is. He's going to cast Force of Will, pitching a Counterbalance.
The thing here is that what else is Phillip going to Force of Will in the face of Todd's Beseju? This may be the only spell that Todd produces for the rest of the game that he can use the Force of Will on. So as anemic as that looks, what else is Phillip supposed to do?
So Phillip attacks for 3, dropping Todd to 17, plays a Flooded Strand, and now we're going to see a Counterbalance. So Phillip had a second Counterbalance, and he's going to cast that. He doesn't have Sensei's Divining Top. Now Todd is going to play Polluted Delta, sacrifice that, and find the Volcanic Island. So looks like we're going to see Show and Tell possibly get cast this turn off of Beseju.
I think we actually might see Through the Breach for Emrakul, but in any case...
Oh, I think he took the Through the Breach with the Vendilion Click. I think that was the card he took with Vendilion Click. Yep. So he's going to go for the Show and Tell. He's going to take a lot of damage off that through the Beseju and Ancient Tomb. Counterbalance tried to counter it. It revealed just an Arid Mesa off the trigger. So Todd puts something off the play, off a Show and Tell. Phillip just puts a land, and there's the Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack's going to get activated, and we're going to see Big Daddy Emrakul enter play. That is going to, the Annihilator trigger is going to go on the stack, and Phillip looks like he's just going to be left with the land here.
Yeah, now Phillip's only hope at this point is drawing the Pithing Needle that he's sideboarded in right now. And even then, it's Todd's a boatload of mana, Jace in hand, plus Beseju still at the ready against nothing.
So with one land, I hope to draw my one sideboard Pithing Needle, and I still have to deal with Jace.
Yeah.
So Phil's back is against the wall here, to say the least. He's at 2 life. He's got 1 land in play, 1 card in hand, facing down a Sneak Attack. He knows his opponent also has a Jace the Mind Sculptor in his hand. He draws a card for the turn. Looks like it's nothing. He's going to pass the turn back. Todd draws a card for the turn. He's going to activate Sneak Attack, put a Grizzlebrand into play, and he will attack Phillip. And that is the game. So Todd Anderson, game 1, dominates with Jace the Mind Sculptor. Game 2, dominates with Boseiju, and a really good hand overall.
Yeah, and that's a great introductory course for those of you who may not have a lot of experience in Legacy. You may look at a list like Blue, White, Red Miracles, see Counterbalance, a bunch of counter spells, some cheap disruption, Vendilion clicks, and say to yourself, this deck's definitely good against combo decks. But the combo decks are so diverse and explosive that there's no guarantee your match is going to be good. And Joe Lissette, in fact, our resident Miracles expert, fell to Storm during the elimination round. So just because you have some counters and Vendilion clicks doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have a good matchup against the combo decks. And if they're packing something like Boseiju and you don't have weapons like Thoughtseize at your disposal, good luck.
Yeah, and there's always those games where the combo deck just looks to get completely annihilated by all the hate cards. But then there's games like this where the combo deck just seems really well prepared and they're able to power through no matter what cards their opponent is boarding in.